Viewer advisory. The events you are about to witness are based on a true story. Some scenes may be deeply unsettling for certain audiences. Viewer discretion is strongly recommended. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Maria Gonzalez pushed open the door to the presidential suite. In 15 years of housekeeping at Toronto's most prestigious hotel, she had walked into countless honeymoon suites the morning after weddings. She expected to find scattered rose petals, empty champagne bottles, and perhaps newlyweds sleeping off their celebration. Instead, she found 24-year-old Kavya Patel's lifeless body sprawled across the cold marble, her red silk wedding sari now stained crimson with blood. The scream that tore from Maria's throat echoed through the hallway of the Fairmont Royal York Hotel that crisp November morning in 2023. What should have been the first day of marital bliss had become a nightmare that would expose lies, deception, and the devastating price of living a double life. Tonight's story is one that will leave you rattled. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, let's begin. Just 12 hours earlier, over 500 guests had witnessed what they believed was the perfect union. The wedding of Kavya Patel and Vikram Malhotra had been Toronto's Indian community event of the year. No expense had been spared on the $200,000 celebration that featured traditional drummers, ornate decorations, and enough flowers to fill a garden. The bride had looked radiant in her heavy red and gold lehenga, carried in on an elaborate platform while guests showered her with rose petals and blessings. But as Toronto police swarmed the luxury suite, the shattered bangles glittering like deadly confetti across the floor told a different story. This was no random crime or robbery gone wrong. The blood spatter patterns, the defensive wounds on Kavya's hands, and the 28-year-old groom found sitting catatonic in the bathroom painted a picture of domestic violence that had spiraled horrifically out of control. Kavya Patel had been her family's golden child. The software engineer from Mumbai had conquered the Western world while supposedly maintaining her traditional Indian values. Her parents, Rajesh and Sunita, had sacrificed everything for their daughter's education, selling family jewelry to pay for her engineering degree and dreaming of the day she would marry into a respectable family. For 3 years, Kavya had maintained the perfect facade. Regular video calls home showed her in traditional dress in a modest apartment, speaking respectfully about her career and faithfully sending money to her family. Her Instagram posts featured temple visits and cultural celebrations, painting the picture of a young woman who had achieved success without losing her roots. What her family didn't know was that every video call was carefully staged, every post meticulously planned, and every conversation designed to hide the truth about her real life in Toronto. The real Kavya lived in a luxury downtown condo, accumulated $75,000 in credit card debt, funding a lifestyle of designer clothes and expensive restaurants, and had been in a passionate but unstable relationship with David Carter, a Canadian investment banker, for over 2 years. David was everything her traditional family would have despised. He loved hockey more than Bollywood, had no interest in marriage or children, and treated Kavya as a convenient girlfriend rather than a life partner. But she had convinced herself that he would eventually commit, that their relationship was worth the elaborate deception she was maintaining with her family. When her parents began pressuring her about marriage, Kavya saw an arranged marriage as the perfect solution. She would marry a wealthy man for financial security while continuing her relationship with David on the side. She had even joked with David about the arrangement, calling it the best of both worlds. Enter Vikram Malhotra, the seemingly perfect groom. 28 years old, handsome, successful, and from one of Toronto's most respected Indian families. Vikram had grown tired of dating modern Canadian women who seemed to prioritize careers over family. When he met Kavya during the traditional matchmaking process, he believed he had found exactly what he was looking for. During their chaperone meetings, Kavya played her role perfectly. She spoke eloquently about wanting to give up her career after marriage to focus on family, about learning his mother's recipes, about raising children with strong cultural values. Vikram was completely charmed by this woman who had succeeded in the Western world but retained her Indian values. But Vikram Malhotra hadn't built his family's import-export business by accepting things at face value. As the wedding date approached, small inconsistencies in Kavya's story began to trouble him. Friends mentioned seeing a woman who looked remarkably like his fiancée at various nightclubs and upscale restaurants, dressed in Western clothes and seeming very comfortable in environments that contradicted her claimed lifestyle. The first concrete evidence came 3 weeks before the wedding when a mutual acquaintance showed Vikram a photo from a Toronto club's social media page. There, unmistakably, was Kavya in a short black dress, holding a martini, and laughing with people who clearly weren't living the modest lifestyle she had described. When confronted, Kavya had been ready with explanations. That was her company's annual party, she claimed, an uncomfortable obligation for professional reasons. Vikram wanted to believe her, but the doubts continued to grow as more evidence surfaced. The breaking point came during Vikram's bachelor party, just 2 days before the wedding. David Carter, emboldened by alcohol and curiosity about his girlfriend's soon-to-be husband, had somehow learned about the bachelor party location and decided to attend with his own group of friends. Intoxicated and boastful, David began talking to one of Vikram's friends about this Indian girl who's getting married for money, but planning to keep seeing me on the side. He bragged about how she had her family totally fooled, and how the wedding was just a business arrangement. What David didn't realize was that he was describing the groom's fiancée to the groom's best friend, Arjun Singh. The confrontation that followed exposed not just the romantic betrayal, but also Kavya's financial lies, her real lifestyle in Toronto, and her detailed plans to continue deceiving both families after the marriage. Vikram spent that night staring at the evidence of his fiancée's comprehensive deception. Text messages between Kavya and David revealed their plan to maintain their relationship after the marriage, with Kavya viewing Vikram as nothing more than a meal ticket. He had 2 choices: cancel the wedding and face the social humiliation of explaining to 500 guests why the ceremony was off, or proceed with the marriage and confront Kavya privately afterward. His traditional upbringing and concern for family honor made the choice for him. The wedding would proceed, but there would be a reckoning. The ceremony itself was magnificent, a spectacle of Indian tradition and Canadian prosperity. Kavya looked every inch the radiant bride as she made her vows, while Vikram smiled and played his part despite the rage building inside him. Wedding photographer later described them as looking perfectly happy and so in love. But there were subtle signs for those who knew where to look. Vikram's smile never quite reached his eyes, and Kavya seemed unusually nervous, checking her phone frequently and excusing herself multiple times during the reception to text David, who had actually attended as a guest through mutual acquaintances. As the evening wound down, both families expressed their joy at how perfectly everything had gone. The couple was escorted to their waiting limousine, and everyone who watched them leave believed they were witnessing the beginning of a beautiful marriage. Instead, they were seeing the final act of a deception that would end in unimaginable tragedy. The presidential suite had been prepared for romance. Rose petals covered the bed, candles flickered on every surface, and champagne waited on ice. But when Vikram closed the door behind them and engaged the security lock, Kavya sensed something was wrong. "Before you get too comfortable," Vikram said quietly, taking out his phone, "I think we need to talk about David Carter." The confrontation began calmly, but escalated quickly as Vikram revealed everything he knew. Kavya's attempts to explain and justify her actions only made him angrier. She told him about the financial pressure, about David's promises, about her fear of disappointing her parents. But each explanation felt like another betrayal. "Do you have any idea what this will do to my family when the truth comes out?" Vikram shouted. "My parents spent their life savings on this wedding. When people find out you're a fraud, we'll be ruined." Hotel security footage showed the argument beginning around 11:30 p.m., with both voices initially controlled. But as the night wore on, the volume increased. Neighbors reported hearing what sounded like furniture being overturned around 1:30 a.m. as the confrontation became physical. Kavya tried to leave, to call her parents, but Vikram blocked her path. The struggle intensified when she grabbed a crystal vase and threw it at him, missing but shattering it against the wall. The sound of breaking glass seemed to snap something in Vikram's mind. What happened next would be debated in court, but the physical evidence told a clear story. Kavya fought desperately for her life, the defensive wounds on her hands and arms showing her attempts to protect herself. The violence continued until approximately 2:45 a.m., when neighbors reported that the shouting and crashing sounds suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was described as more frightening than all the noise that came before it. When police found Vikram sitting in the bathroom, his traditional white kurta stained with his wife's blood, he offered no resistance. The investigation that followed exposed every detail of Kavya's double life, interviewing David Carter, her Toronto friends, and financial institutions that revealed the extent of her deception. David, initially trying to deny the relationship, eventually admitted everything. "She told me the marriage was just for money," he said during his police interview. "She said she loved me and that we would be together after she got what she needed from her husband. I thought it was exciting. I never thought anyone would get hurt." The trial began 8 months later, with Vikram charged with second-degree murder. His defense argued that he had acted in extreme emotional disturbance, pushed beyond his limits by his wife's comprehensive betrayal. The prosecution countered that nothing justified the brutal violence that had ended Kavya's life. Both families were destroyed by the revelations. Kavya's parents wept as they testified about the daughter they thought they knew, while Vikram's family faced ostracism from their community and the collapse of their business. The trial revealed the toxic combination of factors that had led to the tragedy: cultural pressure to maintain family honor, the stress of living between traditional and modern worlds, financial desperation, and the inability of either young person to communicate honestly about their needs and expectations. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Vikram was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. As he was led away in handcuffs, both families wept for the lives lost and destroyed by a preventable tragedy. The case sparked difficult conversations within immigrant communities about the pressures faced by young people trying to balance traditional expectations with modern realities. Counselors and community leaders began advocating for better communication between generations and more support for young immigrants struggling with identity and cultural expectations. Justice was served in the courtroom that day, but the real tragedy was that it took a young woman's death to expose the dangerous price of living a double life. Kavya Patel paid the ultimate price for her deception, while Vikram Malhotra will spend the best years of his life behind bars for letting his rage overcome his humanity. In the end, both families learned that the pursuit of perfect appearances and traditional honor, when built on lies and maintained through deception, can destroy everything it was meant to protect. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We upload new true crime content daily, covering cases you know and many you don't. Stick with us as we bring you more stories that deserve to be heard. See you in the next video.